Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Raw Life Health Show. I'm really so excited about my guest tonight. My guest is Ann Osborne, and Ann has been eating a raw vegan diet for over 31 years, 100%. And I want to introduce Ann and hear about her story. So, Ann, welcome to the show, and thank you for being here.
Thank you very much, Paul. I'm really honored to be invited to chat with you. Thank you.
And you're located in Australia, correct?
Yes, in far north Queensland in Australia, so we're pretty tropical here. Yeah.
Tropical area. Okay. So, Ann, tell us a little about your story about how you got into the raw vegan diet, and then we'll get into the interview about, challenges along the way and so on. But tell us how you got into the raw vegan diet, when you first heard of it and what made you go for it.
Well, it really started when I was 20 years old and I was in pretty good health. So I thought I didn't have any major health challenges or anything. And I was at university in Canterbury in Kent in the UK. And my student digs were at the bottom of a hill and the university campus was at the top of a hill. So every day I'd have to walk up the hill to get to university. And every day, by the time I got to the top of the hill, I'd be wheezy, I'd have a tightness in my chest and I'd be out of breath. And I gave up animal products purely for ethical reasons. There was not a thought of health because, as far as I was aware, I was a pretty healthy 20-year-old. It was purely for ethical reasons. I was already vegetarian and I was aware of certain practices in the dairy industry and the egg industry that I was no longer comfortable participating in that and being responsible for what was going on there. And so me and a very good friend of mine, we decided, right, overnight, we'll be vegan, we'll give up all animal products. And giving up meat had not been an issue at all because I never really liked meat. I never really ate much meat out of choice. With vegetarian products, I did like cheese, I did like milk chocolate, and so I'd been putting it off. I knew the ethical implications, but I've been putting it off a bit, I think, for kind of selfish reasons because I like those foods, but decided no more, can't do this, it goes against my ethics and my beliefs. So overnight, gave up all animal products and became vegan. So when I was going up this hill to university, the very next day, and this is why it struck me, the very next day, after I gave up all animal products, I got to the top of the hill and I was no longer wheezing and I was no longer tight in my chest. And it was like, oh, wow. And it was like a revelation. It really hit me. I thought, my goodness, I wasn't expecting any health benefits at all. It was nothing to do with health. But here I was the very next day experiencing a big change in my health. I wasn't wheezing, which I just thought, oh, that's kind of natural, And so from that moment on, that's what started me off on the path to find out the connections between what we consume and how we feel, because it had been such a sort of revelation to me, getting to the top of this hill and thinking, wow, I wasn't expecting anything like this. And so from that moment onwards, I was very interested to research, to read about health and diet. And I tried various types of raw vegan and vegan diets. I knew I'd always ethically be a vegan, but within that parameter, I was into finding out, what worked. And I tried an Ann Wigmore, lots of sprouts, wheatgrass type of raw vegan diet. I tried a macrobiotic vegan diet, which was just about 100% cooked. I tried a whole food vegan diet. I started eliminating, all processed white flour, white sugar. And I felt good on all of the different diets I tried, but not that good that I stuck with any one of them for more than about 18 months. And then in 1990, I was back in my hometown of Leicester, which is in the UK, and I was part of an animal rights group. And we'd have various speakers. And one week we had this guy, David Shelley, and he was a fruitarian. He was a local Leicester lad, and he just was amazing. He had so much good energy. He had great skin. He cycled everywhere, and whatever he was doing was working really well for him. And a whole group of us, we were all ethical vegans and on various different diets. And we thought, wow, we want some of what he's got, And so we all started out on this fruitarian diet. And I was in the early stages of pregnancy at the time with my eldest son. So I did a transitional diet. So about a year, I gradually ate more and more fruit and less cooked vegan food until after about a year, I was on 100% fruit diet. And that transitional period I felt was very important to me because it showed me what worked, what didn't. So within that transitional period, I tried 80% raw, 50% raw, 90% raw, 100% raw. And for me personally, when I was 100% raw, I felt better. Even if I was just having a baked potato as an evening meal. And if I had that, I found if I had that for more than a couple of days, I would notice that my body odor changed, the taste in my mouth when I woke up, there was a difference if I did it for more than a couple of days. And that transition, I think, helped me to get into the fruitarian diet and also to realize what worked for me, because some people do very well on 80%, 90% raw. But for me personally, I feel at my best on 100% raw, and I still revert back to thinking about that transitional period to show, what works best for me, and thinking about how I felt 80% raw, how I felt sort of 90% raw. So that's how I got into the diet. David Shelley, who influenced me, was very much into Arnold Ehret and Arnold Ehret's teachings. So that's kind of the way I came into the diet. I read his books, I read Maurice Croc's books, I read Esty Honorable's books, and it was very much always monomeals, simple monomeals of fruit. And we were lucky enough to start an organic buying group, which was wonderful because it meant we'd get really good quality fruit from all over the world, all organic. Because in the UK, there's not a great variety of good quality fruit. There's some great fruit in the sort of summer and the autumn, but for most of the year, it's not locally available. So to access this great quality fruit, and it was so good that you wouldn't want to eat it not in a monomeal in a way. We had beautiful apricots from Italy and sweet grenadilla from Burkina Faso and Egyptian mangoes. It was just a really interesting time to be part of that group of people starting out on a fruitarian diet. So socially, we had those connections, and also in terms of fruit quality, we were able to access really good quality fruit, both of which I think really helped. And I've stuck with the diet, and it's stuck with me for the past 31 years.
Wow, that's amazing. Now I have several questions for you from based on what you said. So first is fellow David Shelley. How old was he at the time when you first saw him? And tell us a little about his story. Is he still around, and is he still doing the fruitarian?
Yeah, he's still around. He's not on a fruitarian diet. He's vegan, but not on a fruitarian diet. But yes, he and two of his friends, so there were three of them, and they started reading the books of Arnold Ehret, and they were also very much into physical training and fitness, which Arnold Ehret covers as well in his books. There's a lot about diet, a lot about transition, fasting, but also about physical fitness. And for them, that was very important. They both did a lot of running, cycling, hiking. And what they found, all three of them, and especially David, is that the diet really helped him with his fitness. And in Leicester, which is where we're all from, there's a hill that's kind of colloquially known as Agony Hill, because runners go up it and it is agony. And what David found, after he'd been a few months on fruit, he was going up the hill and it was no longer like agony to him. He found it was just a smooth run. And he very much tied that into Arnold Ehret and Arnold Ehret's equation, V equals P minus O, which is vitality equals power minus obstructions.
Yep.
So basically, the cleaner you get, the more your body will work well for you and the more energy and vitality you'll have. So they were very much, the three of them, two brothers and David Shelley, were very much into Arnold Ehret. Simple fruit, good quality fruit. And that's what I kind of learned at the beginning, how important sunshine is, fresh air, exercise. It's not just what you eat, but good quality fruit. And I learned a lot from all three of them in terms of picking good fruit, sun exposure, and daily exercise.
Well, how long was he a fruitarian for? And do you know why he stopped? Or maybe these are questions I should ask him.
Yeah, I don't know why he stopped. I think often with a lot of people, it's social. When you're with other people that are doing what you're doing, it's a lot easier. But for some people, when they go out in the world and they're mixing with
Sure.
people that are on very different diets, or they're in a relationship with someone that's in a different diet, I think that can be a factor. And it can be hard to get on track. And I think also something that can happen is when you get into a different way of eating, you kind of forget how good you felt on the fruit diet. So I think people get off track, get used to that sort of less vital, that less energetic, getting illnesses and pains and aches and things, and don't remember, how
Sure.
wonderful they
Sure.
felt. I think that could
Now,
be an issue. But I think David had probably been on the diet for a year or so when I first met him. I don't know how long he stayed on the diet for, but he was a very good testimony
and
to
you're
the
just
diet. He
assuming,
really was.
and you're just assuming that's why maybe social reasons he got off. That's just a thought, right?
I think so, because as far as I know, he's still ethically vegan.
Sure.
And I don't think it was that the diet wasn't working for him, but I really don't
Okay.
know. But
Well,
I do, yeah, think it could be social
well,
issues. Yeah.
let's get into you because you are the reason why we're here tonight, and I'm so excited to hear about your transgression. So you said you were pregnant when you first heard about this, and you were making that transition. So,
Hmm.
how'd the pregnancy go? Everything went fine with it, and were you 100% by the time you had the baby?
Just after, I think it was just a few months after when I got 100%, because I was realizing then that I'm bringing a child up and I want that child to be on a raw diet. So I've got to really be on the raw diet as well. So yeah, I transitioned over about a year, but I had a wonderful pregnancy. Both my pregnancies, I had a pregnancy 12 and a half years after 100% raw. And both my pregnancies were wonderful. I worked up until 7 months pregnant with my first child, 8 months pregnant with my second. I didn't have any health issues, no swelling, no aches, no backache. Just wonderful, just a really beautiful part of my life. I just felt, I think when your endocrine system, your hormonal system is working well, you feel wonderful. And people that's hormonal system is impaired has a huge effect. Women that get premenstrual syndrome turn into a very different person just from that very sort of small imbalance in hormones. And so in pregnancy, for a woman, your hormones are pretty ramped up and you can feel wonderful. But on the other hand, if your endocrine system is being challenged or compromised, you can feel pretty bad. So yeah, I felt wonderful, had loads of energy, worked, exercised, had good births. So yeah, really enjoyed
So,
the
so
pregnancies.
after 12 and a half years on a fruitarian diet, that's when, hold on here. Okay. So after 12 and a half years on a fruitarian diet, then you got pregnant, 11 years, so you conceived, and then you had another baby as a raw fruitarian.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, when I'd been on the raw diet for, 12 years. And what was interesting was with my first pregnancy, when I was in transition, I was still having some cooked vegan food at the end of the pregnancy in the first few months. And the difference, so I was 12 and a half years older when I gave birth. And my body had taken a little bit of time to get back with my first pregnancy. And I was expecting that with my second pregnancy. I was 12 and a half years older. But the very next day, after giving birth, my stomach was flat. And I was just like, wow, because with my first pregnancy, it'd taken a few months to get back. I mean, obviously, it's not exactly the same as it is before you're pregnant, but it was flat. There was no bloating. There was no, sort of pouching or anything of the stomach. And that really amazed me because I wasn't expecting it. And so, and the birth was probably better with my second child. I had a home birth with my second child, a water birth, and it was lovely to be at home and just be able to get into your own bed after you've had your baby. So yeah, so 12 and a half years older, but a wonderful pregnancy again. And in terms of my body recovering from the pregnancy, it was much faster, even though I was 12 and a half years older. So that did surprise me. But I'd been on a raw fruit diet for, a lot longer.
wow, so I'm so excited because you mentioned three books that were really important to me. And you and I went raw around the same time, and we have similar
Mm-hmm.
stories. So, but the first person was Arnold Ehret. His books are classics; they're amazing. The other
Mm-hmm.
person, Morris Kruk and Essie Hannibal. I
Mm.
interviewed both of them for my first book, The
Oh.
Raw Life, and I actually got to meet Maurice Kruk in person. And
Mm.
just both of those were amazing books, and they're out of print now. But oh
Mm.
wow, and that really helped me. So that's amazing. Did you ever meet either one of them?
No, I didn't meet either one of them, but I devoured their books, and who they are kind of comes a lot through in their books. And I think with all three, Arnold Ehret, Maurice Kruk, Essie Honorable, they're so inspiring. And when you read their work, it's like, because you can feel a bit alone, you can feel there's not many people doing what I'm doing, and am I really on the right path? And then when you read those books, you think, yes, how much what they write resonates with you and your experiences and everything. So yes, I feel very fortunate that I had some really inspiring reading matter in those early years, and they're still my favorite books. I think I've read a lot of stuff, I've done a lot of research, but those three authors really
Yeah.
stand out for me as being so inspirational.
Yeah, I mean, I just remember my conversations with both of them, and then to meet Maurice Kruk was amazing. So let me ask you, so when you say you're on a fruitarian diet, uh, are you 100% fruit? Do you eat anything else?
Occasionally. So day to day, I'm mostly 100% fruit. And I also include avocados, which I find useful in terms of they've got a lot of macronutrients in, and they grow a lot here, and they're a very nutritious fruit. So for a lot of the year, I have avocados and juicy fruit. Occasionally, if there's a celebration, I will make a fruitarian cake, which has raw nuts in it. And on that occasion, I will eat some raw nuts. Also, macadamia nuts, new season macadamia nuts. So when they first fall off the tree, they're quite moist, they're quite wet. They're also called wet nuts. And I will eat some then because they taste almost like coconut. And I do eat jelly coconuts, so young coconuts sometimes as well, and I really enjoy them. I don't eat so much greens. I've never had a craving towards greens. When my children were little, I used to get celery and I used to get greens in, but nobody ate them and they'd end up in the compost heap. They weren't attracted to them either. And this is a bit of a thing. A lot of people say you have to have greens, but kind of as far as I'm aware, and also Arnold Ehret coming in and being influenced by Arnold Ehret, Ehret says you can have greens if you want, but you don't have to. And I personally think if you can access really good quality fruit, you can get your needs met, but not everybody can. And some people desire greens and crave them. And I think certainly if you desire greens and you crave them, then they're an important food for you. But if you don't, and the thing is, you've got to be able to access good quality fruit, because there's nothing in greens, no mineral in greens that doesn't also exist in fruits. It's just the ratios can be different. But for example, if you've got a mamey sapote, and it's been organically grown, perfectly tree ripened, falls off, is still warm in the sun, and you eat that. And then you compare that to hydroponic greens that have been in a fridge for a week. What's going to have the most minerals in it? It's not always that clear cut. Greens aren't always higher. They often are, but not always. But I think it's very important that we get our micronutrients met. And some people do need to eat greens to get their micronutrients met. So your micronutrients are your vitamins, minerals, antioxidants. And so if you're not getting those met, you're not going to thrive, you're not going to be well. And a lot of that is how the produce is grown, the soil it's grown in, and with fruit, if it's picked ripe, because when it's perfectly ripe, it has its maximum amount of micronutrients. So I don't usually eat greens. Very occasionally I'll sort of maybe have a bit of dill. I actually really kind of like the taste of dill, or a little bit of parsley, or a little bit of spinach, or if I get a craving for it. And very, very occasionally I will get a craving for greens, and then I will eat young tender leaves. But ordinarily I'm mostly fruit, very occasionally eating other things, but yeah, mostly fruit, but not 100%.
So what about supplements? Do you take any supplements, vitamin supplements at all?
I don't take any supplements. When I was pregnant and breastfeeding, I took B12, and if I was to get pregnant again, which I don't think I will, but if I was, I would do the same again, and I would recommend women that are pregnant and breastfeeding to be very aware of their B12 levels, because I did know somebody whose baby was born severely B12 deficient, and luckily a doctor knew what it was, but that can cause permanent nerve damage in a child. So B12 is very important. Another vitamin is very important that we can't get from our food is vitamin D. Now, I live in a sunny place and I garden every day, most of the day. So I get a lot of vitamin D. I also live near to the equator. So most of the year round, the sun is at the right angle so that you can actually get vitamin D from sunlight, because in a lot of cooler places, there's only certain months a year. You can also store vitamin D for several months. So I don't supplement vitamin D. But that's another one that I would advise people, if you live somewhere where it's not sunny or you don't go out in the sun much, to either supplement a vegan vitamin D or to get a Spurty vitamin D lamp. But there's a lot more we get from the sun than just vitamin D. So I do think getting out in the sun, but having, an appropriate level of sun exposure. So not a whole load, especially if you've got pale skin, but it does also, like infrared radiation influences our melatonin production. So that's another thing we get from the sun. So melatonin is a very important hormone. So the sun is important for a lot more than just vitamin D. But going back to supplementation, I would personally look at vitamin D and B12 and have your levels checked. And if they're low, my B12, when I have blood tests, is usually in normal ranges, but on the low end. And I've never had any symptoms of B12 deficiency. If I did, I would supplement for sure, because you don't want to get permanent nerve damage. And the symptoms of vitamin B12 deficiency are very clear, tingling of the fingers, numbness, soreness on the tongue. And I do know a couple of people that about 18 months after they went on a fruitarian diet developed B12 deficiency with those symptoms. As soon as they supplemented, it went away. So if you supplement early on, if you do get any deficiency symptoms, I've never had any B12 deficiency symptoms. And there's a book by Sheila Andrews, the No Cooking Fruitarian Cookbook. And she's an English lady, and she mentions how her and her daughter always had lowish levels of B12. So they supplemented for several years and they didn't notice any difference. And in the end, they stopped supplementing. And they thought that possibly some people on a fruitarian diet have low levels, but still feel good and aren't deficient. And I kind of feel in accord with that, because I also know quite a lot of people who have been on this diet for 20 years or more, have never supplemented and have never exhibited any B12 deficiency symptoms. I think one issue might be over-sanitization, because B12 is produced by bacteria. So if we're eating fruit from the garden, if we're digging around in the soil and stuff, we're more likely to get B12 into our bodies. If we eat supermarket fruit that's been sprayed with sulfur dioxide, that's been washed, if we wash all our fruit because we have to, because it's not organic, we might not be getting that same B12 that possibly we can get if we're eating more naturally grown fruits. But yeah, I think it's very important to meet your micronutrient needs on this diet. Very, very important. And often a lot's talked about macros. So 80-10-10 diet, getting enough carbs, getting enough, ratios of protein, fat and carbs. But not so much is talked about micronutrients, which is the minerals, vitamins and antioxidants. And I think that's where we're more challenged, because soils are often degraded and the soils don't have those minerals in that we need. So if the soil hasn't got the minerals in, then we're quite likely to become deficient, because if we're eating food that's grown in those soils, we're not getting the minerals we need. And one thing that I think is really, really important is eating organic or naturally grown fruits. And the reason for this is nothing is in isolation. This world is amazing because it has lots of symbiotic relationships. And one wonderful symbiotic relationship is the relationship between trees, and that includes fruit trees, and the mycelium, or the fungi in the soil. So fungi in the soil can't photosynthesize. They don't have any leaves. They can't create those carbohydrates that trees can, because trees have got leaves. So what happens is the trees share carbohydrates with the mycelium in the soil. And in return, the mycelium break down certain inorganic bonds in calcium compounds. Say, for example, calcium phosphate. They break that down into calcium and phosphate ions, and then the trees are able to absorb the calcium. So if you've got an area that has had a lot of fungicides or pesticides or herbicides, they kill the mycelium. Also, tilling of the soil kills the mycelium because it breaks up the mycelium body, which is why permaculture has lots of advantages in terms of nutrient content of the food. So if you have no mycelium in the soil, it doesn't matter how much calcium you put in the soil, the trees won't be able to absorb it, and the food that you eat will be deficient in calcium. There was a farmer in northern New South Wales in Australia, and he was putting literally tons of calcium carbonate or lime on his property. He had an avocado farm, and the soil was still testing low for available calcium because the fungi had all been killed. So he had to put spores, inoculi of fungi into his soil, which built up the fungus, built up the mycelium, and then he got calcium in his fruits, in his avocados, in the trees. So this is one reason a lot of people say, oh, organic, it's not that much different. But if we're eating produce grown in soils where the mycelium are all killed, we're breaking that really important relationship between the fungi in the soil and the trees. And the minerals will not be absorbed by the trees in the same way because we haven't got that relationship. So this for me is a really, really important reason for eating non-sprayed fruit, wild fruit, forest fruit, grow your own, organic, biodynamic, so that we ensure we get the micronutrients we need. Yeah, very, very important.
So if you don't mind me asking, what's your age?
I'm 56.
56, okay. Another question is, do you juice fruits or do you just eat whole raw fruits?
Mostly I eat whole fruits. The only fruits I juice are oranges and mandarins, just because I've always really loved orange juice. And I use an old 1966 hand juicer, and that leaves most of the fiber in, yet makes the smoothest juice. So I do juice oranges, and I do extended mono orange juice diets. I used to use an electric juicer years and years ago, but for the past, probably the past 20 years, I've just used a hand juicer, which keeps the fiber in. So there's a lot of fiber in that juice, and I've been fine. I felt really good doing extended orange juice mono diets. It doesn't necessarily work for anyone, but
when you do the orange juice, do you ever dilute it with water or no?
No, I don't. I don't dilute it with water, but I ensure I get ripe oranges. And I've put whole boxes of oranges on the compost heap before because they weren't ripe enough. You can test the pH with pH paper, because unripe citrus will damage your teeth. It will damage the enamel on your teeth. And I bought 2 lots of oranges a few years ago from a grower in Australia. There were Valencias and there were Navels. Now, the Valencias were not properly ripe. I tested the pH of both. The Navels actually had a pH of 6, which is really sort of low in acid, because 7 is neutral. The Valencias had a pH of 4. So they were potentially 100 times more acidic, because it's times 10 each pH division. And I wouldn't eat them, they would just be composted. So it's very important to get ripe citrus, especially if you have any dental issues, because it will damage your enamel. And I think another important thing on that point is not to brush your teeth after you've eaten, especially the pH acidic fruits. Brush your teeth before, rinse with water afterwards, and leave a while, because otherwise you'll brush the fruit acids into your enamel, which is not ideal. If you brush before, you'll remove any plaque, which would cause, dental issues. So you remove the bacteria, remove the plaque before you have your pH acidic fruits, and then rinse with pure water. And I also think you shouldn't be able to feel anything on your teeth. If you eat a piece of fruit and you feel it on your teeth afterwards, like an unripe banana or an unripe kiwi or an unripe pineapple, then immediately rinse your teeth, lower, so higher the pH, because it will be acidic pH. Try and neutralize your mouth, because that acid from the fruit, if it's very acid, will damage your tooth enamel. And I don't think you should be able to feel it. If you have a properly ripe orange or a properly ripe pineapple, you don't feel it on your teeth. It doesn't damage. And again with kiwis, but unfortunately, commercially, so much fruit is picked underripe, so it doesn't spoil in its transportation and on its shelf on the supermarket. So ripeness, it's very hard to get properly ripe fruit. I never eat pineapples unless I'm living where pineapples grow, because it's so hard to get a properly ripe one. So yeah, I think it's very important from a dental point of view, watch pH acidic fruits. They still are alkaline in your body, like a lemon is alkaline in your body because it has alkaline elements in it. But initially, it'll be pH acidic, and you don't want too much of that on your teeth, especially if you've got any kind of dental issues at all.
Sure. Can you give us an example of what time you get up and what you eat in an average day?
Yeah, so I get up, I'm an early riser. I get up between 4 and 5, and I'll do some work on the land, or when I used to work for the Woodstock Fruit Festival, I did computer work. Now I'm working on the land. It's a bit different. I go out and I'll do watering, weeding. So I'll do a few hours work, and then I'll come in and I'll have breakfast. And breakfast will always be a mono meal of juicy seasonal fruit. At the moment, it's watermelon, but in season, it could be orange juice, it could be persimmons, it could be mangoes, it'll be grapes, whatever is good and in season. And I will just have a mono meal of that. And then
How much
I'll
of
go
that?
and do
How much of that? As much as you want? Like, how much are we
as
talking?
much as I want.
But
Yeah,
on
as much
average,
so.
how much is that? Like, is that like one watermelon or 6 watermelons? What is it on average? Like, how many is that a mango, or is that 7 mangoes? Like, what is that for you?
I would eat maybe 2 to 3 mangoes for a meal. I would eat maybe a quarter of a watermelon. I don't eat vast amounts of fruit. I needed to do that when I first went on a fruit diet. I found that I needed to eat much higher quantities of fruit. And then I did an extended orange juice mono diet for 52 days, a couple of years into the diet. I went into that mono diet with no expectation, because I was just accompanying a friend, and the friend didn't even do one day, and I just carried on. And when I finished, what I found was that I just felt that the fruit was doing me so much more good, and I needed to eat about half of what I was eating before to maintain my weight. I always had good energy, but in terms of maintaining my weight, before I did the extended diet, it was a bit of a challenge. I was always kind of, a bit lower than I'd like to be. And I just felt, because there was no expectations, because I just went into the diet to accompany a friend, and I had no thoughts beforehand. Oh, I'm expecting this, I'll get this will happen. There was zero expectations. So I didn't even have any expectations when I finished, but noticing how much better my assimilation was. I didn't need to eat as much, and I just believed that I was assimilating what I was eating so much better. So yeah, so I don't
So breakfast,
eat huge amounts.
after you get up 4 or 5, you spend a couple hours in the garden doing some work, then you have
Yeah.
your mono fruit breakfast. So then what do you eat next? Tell us more about your diet.
I'll usually have another meal of juicy fruit, or kind of lunchtime, I'll have avocados, and I eat avocados as a mono meal. So I'll have 2 or 3 avocados by themselves, and they have to be good. And I think that's the thing about eating mono. You can't eat anything. Some people say, oh, that melon wasn't good, so I blended it with some papaya, and then it was good. In nature, a monkey, if it ate a piece of fruit and it wasn't very good, it would spit it out. Life's too short. So eating mono meals, the fruit has to stand alone. It has to be good. And that means it's good quality. It has higher levels of micronutrients and macronutrients usually. So, it really has to stand alone. So yeah, I eat whatever I eat, apart from if it's a special occasion and I make a cake, I'll eat mono meals.
Okay,
So I'll either have
Your first
Yeah.
meal in the morning, then in the afternoon you have your avocados, or your second meal you have your
Yeah.
avocados.
Or sometimes I do avocados as the last meal, but I'll usually have 3 meals. So first meal is juicy fruit, always. Second meal can be avocados or could be juicy fruit. And then the last meal will be more juicy fruit or avocados. So they can change around just depending on how I feel. I also run 10K every other day. So on a running day, I might eat more. Often I'll find I'm hungrier after on a running day, even though I'm physically active in the garden. When I go running as well, I'll maybe eat a bit
That's
more
10
than
kilometers, not miles. That's kilometers,
yeah, that's kilometers, it's 10K.
equivalent. It's more than miles. So 10 kilometers is more like 15 miles or something.
No, 10 kilometers would be maybe 7-ish miles, between 7 and 8.
Okay,
No, maybe,
seven. Okay, it's
or
the other
maybe
way around.
lower.
Yeah, it's
Yeah, it's the other way
so
around.
I,
So
I knew that, but I
might be
kind of got
six,
that.
about 6 or 7 or something
Oh,
like
so you're
that.
running
Yeah.
you're running 6 or 7 miles a day, every other day.
Every other day, and I find that works. I used to run every day, but just in terms of having time, because it's an hour, I'm not a fast runner, it takes me an hour to do 10K, which is, or just under an hour. And just when you're busy, it's sometimes can just eat into your day, but I think it's important to prioritize your exercise and your health. So it's very good for me to do that. And so I make sure that I do it. Unless I've got an injury, I'm out there every other day. And I love it. It's also a time when
is that the main type of exercising you do, or do you do other exercise as well as that?
I walk. I don't drive. So if I have to walk into town, it's a 14K walk into town. So 14 kilometers I regularly walk into town to get my fruit, and then I'll get the school bus home. So I do walk. I've never driven, so I'm a big walker. I walk, I run, I dance. I love dancing. I love just like putting some music on, there's no one else there, and just dancing. It's that's great, and that's good physical exercise. And also gardening when you're out there, shoveling earth, moving pots around, lugging hoses. It's a physical job, which I really like, and I feel better for doing that rather than working on a computer in terms of physical wellness.
Now,
so
you said you get up at about 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning.
Between 4 and 5.
So what time do you usually go to sleep?
Between 9 and 10.
Okay, so you're getting about 6 hours a night usually of sleep?
Seven's good for me. About seven, and sometimes I need less. In the summer, sometimes I'll be good with 6. I find that when there's more light in the day, I need less sleep. In the winter, I'll get, a bit more sleep. But here we don't get that big difference between winter and summer in terms of day length, like you do further away from the equator. So we don't get vast differences, but still there is a difference, and I'll find I'll sleep more.
What time do you usually eat your last meal? Do you have a time that you try to stop?
I like to eat it early, so 3-4 o'clock. No later than that is optimal for me. And I did a whole year in 2020. 2020, I did up to 2021. It was August to August. I did a whole year of intermittent fasting where I only ate, and it was still fruitarian, I only ate between 8 and 2, so 8 a.m. and 2 p.m. And that was great. I felt really, really good doing that. I stopped because I was doing a lot of work that didn't fit in with me eating with those hours. And then I haven't got back onto that, but I still do feel good. And unlike this morning, I didn't eat till like 9:30 a.m. and I probably finish about 3 to 4 p.m. I feel better when I do it within a window. Just me personally. Some people don't have breakfast, and I tend to more have breakfast but finish earlier in the day. I don't like eating. I like going to bed with an empty stomach.
And what about water? Do you drink a lot of water at all?
Now that varies, because I know there's some people that are fruitarians that say you have to drink X amount of water. There's other people that say water's toxic, don't drink any. Now I'm like in the middle. In the winter, I will sometimes not, especially if I'm having melons and other juicy fruits, I will not drink water sometimes, or extra water. For 3 or 4 weeks, I will go without drinking additional water. In the summer, or if I'm exercising a lot, I will drink maybe 2 liters of water a day. I listen to how my body feels, and also it depends on how much I'm perspiring and how hot it is. yeah, winter, and the same was in the UK. In the winter, I'd go for months sometimes without drinking additional water. But I was urinating frequently. My urine was clear. I didn't have any symptoms of dehydration, because I think it's very, very important to keep hydrated. Really important, because if we damage our kidneys, we don't know. There's no obvious signs a lot of the time if we have kidney damage. And unlike the liver, the kidneys can't really regenerate. So once we've damaged our kidneys, unless we're very young and there's very slight damage, they're unlikely to regenerate. The liver, on the other hand, there's cases where people have had 10% liver function and they've fasted, or they've gone to health retreats and adopted a raw vegan diet, and they've got 90% back. So they've got a 90% of liver function. So the liver is amazing in that it can regenerate a lot, but the kidneys aren't like that. And once they're damaged, once they're compromised, you're going to be compromised forever, basically. So I think hydration is really, really important, and you can keep a lookout on your urination, how frequently you're urinating, the color of your urine, if you have any dark color discoloration under your eyes, because that corresponds to the kidneys. And you'll often notice people that have kidney disease have got really dark under their eyes. It seems to affect that area on the face. So yeah, I will drink 2 liters of water in addition to having loads of melons and juicy fruit. It's not just that, because people that are having concentrated foods such as bread and other cereals, they're very dry most of the time. And so you will need to eat, or if they're having salt, added sodium chloride, that will dehydrate you, and people will need to consume a lot more water. When you're on a high water diet that actually hydrates you, you may find you don't need to drink additional water when it's cooler, but always monitor yourself and always, listen to your, what's going on in your body. Does it feel a bit dehydrated? Because once you get dehydrated, once your kidneys are damaged, it's too late. So yeah, it really varies with the water. In the summer, I can drink 2 or more liters a day in addition to juicy fruits. But in the winter, I can go for maybe 3-4 weeks without drinking any.
Wow. So you mentioned about your B12 getting checked. Do you check your blood work on a regular basis every year, or once every 20 years, or never?
I do, but I haven't done it for quite a few years. The last time I had my blood work checked, everything was in normal ranges, apart from, B12 was normal, but it was in the low, but it wasn't out the normal parameters. And the doctor, I don't tell my doctor that I'm a fruitarian. I tell him I'm a vegan, because I just think, But anyhow, and he was looking at my cholesterol results, and he was looking and he said, "You've got very good cholesterol levels." He said, "Oh, I think you've got the best cholesterol levels I've ever seen." And I was like, "Oh, wow." And the HDL was very high and the LDL was very low. And he couldn't quite understand that. So yeah, my blood results are fine, but I think it's limiting to just say, "Oh, my blood results fine, so everything's okay." Because people who are very sick can have normal blood results. They can have, all their things are in normal ranges, but they can be pretty sick. I think it's one thing, but more important is, to me, to how you're doing, is how you feel first thing in the morning. When you get up first thing in the morning, unless you've had a particularly bad night's sleep or a late night, but in general, how do you feel first thing when you wake up? Are you ready to spring out of bed? Have you got energy? Do you feel great? Are you singing and dancing in the morning? Or do you feel, I feel really hungover? And even when I was vegan, before I was raw vegan, I'd get up in the morning and I'd need a cold shower, or I'd need something to stimulate me in the morning before I felt awake. And for me, that's a real barometer of health. Also, hair, skin, nails, teeth, your immune system. If you bruise yourself, how easily do you bruise? Or how easily does a wound heal? And they're really good indications that you're getting what you need in your diet. And I remember in one of Arnold Ehret's books, he states how he cut himself intentionally. When he was on a fruit diet, it healed very, very quickly. On a vegetarian diet, it took a long time. And when he was on a mixed diet with animal flesh, he had to actually fast to get it to heal. And I've really noticed that if I do hurt myself, I heal so much quicker since being on this diet. And bruising, I used to bruise as a child. I would bruise so easily. I was always like, my legs would be always covered in bruises and fading bruises. And since adopting the diet, I very rarely bruise. I have to hit myself very hard and knock myself on something to bruise. And that to me is a sign that the capillaries are much stronger and functioning much better. So the whole circulatory system is working better. So there's those things to be mindful of. It's not just, you can get a good result on a piece of paper, but your immune system, your hair, your skin, your teeth, do wounds heal quickly? Do bruises heal quickly? Do you bruise easily? All those things, I think, are very good indicators if you're meeting your micro and macronutrient requirements with your diet. And if you're not, you need to reassess it. And I think this is something that's really important. And Arnold Ehret also said this. He said, the single reason why most people fail at a fruit diet or fasting is not giving enough individual consideration and over time. So what that means is that everybody is slightly different. I really, really believe that we all have a fruit-eating body by design, and that we were designed to be fruit eaters. And nothing I've studied over the past 31 years has led me to believe anything other than that. But what we eat, what our parents eat, sins of the father, what our grandparents ate, affects our DNA. And that's why some people can be on a fruit diet for 18 months and be severely B12 deficient, and others can do it for 20, 30 years, not supplement and not be B12 deficient. We all have varying needs. So to say everybody needs X amount of calories, or everybody needs this amount of calcium, or everybody needs to eat greens, or everybody should be doing that, I think these blanket statements can harm people. We need to look at what we need, as an individual. And I think that's a really important part of the diet, in terms of, are we getting our needs met? It might be different. Someone else might need to eat more fat or more greens or more calories.
That's great. Your information is wonderful here. I so appreciate you sharing, because I agree with so many of the things you're saying. And I want to let everybody know that you are on Facebook, you're on social media, and you're also, you have a website. And I'm going to put your website and the link to your Facebook below the video in the description. So if anyone wants to get in touch with Annie Osborne, you just go there, you click on it, you can get in touch with her. But tell everybody your website. So
yeah, my website is fruitgod.com. So you can, there's contact details on there, and there's also articles. I put a lot of stuff on Facebook because I have a lot of friends on Facebook, and I like to share information. So on my Facebook page, I have a whole album full of newspaper clippings going back like 100, 150 years, when the fruit diet was promoted. Amazingly, before sort of big pharma and before a lot of these big companies, sort of controlled the media, there were lots of articles on how good fruit was, how good the fruit diet was. So I have a whole album of those clippings on Facebook. I also put a lot of information about fruit. So if you search Anne Osborne, I think I'm fruitbatanne, /fruitbatanne on Facebook.
I'll put the links below the video so everyone can click on it.
And this is my book. It's not in hard copy anymore because I had a really good green printer, and they went out of business, and I'm looking for a local green printer because I want to make sure it's all ethical. The conditions for the workers are good. They don't use any toxic inks. The energy they use is green energy, all that kind of stuff. But I do have a PDF copy of my book. So if you email me, if you contact me, then I will send you a free PDF copy of that book. And I hope that in the future I'll be able to find a good printer that I'm happy with, so that I'll get it in hard copy again. But in the meantime, I have a free PDF copy.
Wonderful. I have two more questions for you. One of them is Arnold Ehret and Maurice Kruk both talk a lot about water fasting. Over the years, have you experimented with water fasting?
Yes, I have. I've done some short water fasts, and then it must be about 15 years or more ago, I just wasn't hungry one day, and I didn't eat, and I wasn't hungry the next day. And then I thought I'd carry it on. Now, I was looking after a small child at the time, and so most of my life, like, it's only the past year or so I've not had children to look after. And I haven't water fasted, you know, when they were younger for the most part, because I thought, well, when you water fast, you've got to rest. And if you've got young kids, you can't rest. But then I think my youngest son was about 3, and I just did this water fast for 2 weeks, and I found that I did have energy. Maybe not as much as usual, but I could look after him and do my daily chores and do what I needed to do. And I was working as a massage therapist at the time, so I was doing that work as well. And, you know, it worked very well. And it was almost like a kind of rebirth after I finished that water fast of 14 days. And I hadn't gone into it with any expectations again, because I just started because I wasn't hungry for a couple of days. But I felt really, it was amazing. And I don't, you know, some people don't agree with water fasting. I think you have to be very careful with water fasting because you can't control the level of elimination. Now, I tend to sort of do my sort of yearly service at the garage, I tend to do an extended mono fruit diet. Usually orange juice. In Australia, in England, it used to be melons. Because the thing is, when you do a mono diet of fruit, you do cleanse, you do rebalance, but you can control the elimination to quite an extent, because you have more fruit. If you want to slow the elimination, if you want to speed it up, you have less. Whereas with a water fast, I think for most people, you really need to be supervised, because there can be a lot of emotional detox, there can be anxiety, there can be all sorts of things happening. So you need to be safe. You need to be in a safe environment to water fast. And it's not for everybody. And I think, again, everybody is individual, and it's about finding what works for us. And I never say the fruit diet's the best diet for everyone. I would never say that. For me, it's worked really well. And all the different vegan diets I tried can't touch the fruit diet in terms of how I feel and how my body works. And like, I'm 56 and I can still go running every other day, and I can still do whatever I want to do, and I don't have aches and pains. A lot of people say, as you get older, it's just part of getting older, dear, you know, but it's not. You know, you can be any age and be fit and vital and healthy depending on your diet and lifestyle. And it's not, you know, it's not just food, it's a lot of other things as well. It's sunshine, fresh air, mental attitude, relationships. But yeah,
I often tell people the simple phrase, do what works best for you. If it's working, you do not change, but if it's not working, but
yeah.
so if you don't mind me asking, what is your weight and your height? Because I know people are going to be curious about that.
Yes, so my weight is about 110 pounds, and it's been that really about for the past 30 years, apart from when I was pregnant. And both times when I was pregnant, I put on 22 pounds for each pregnancy, and that was it. And then I lost it with the first pregnancy. It took a few months. With the second pregnancy, the very next day, I was back to my normal weight, which was quite amazing. And I'm 5'6", about 5'6", if I stand up straight. Yeah, about 5'6" tall.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, is there any other topic that I mean, we could talk to you forever because your information is so great. And I would love to have you back on as again, and let's talk about more topics. But is there any topic that's pressing on your mind right now that you want to share with the people?
Well, I just maybe like to finish by saying 3 things that I think are important to thrive on this diet. And it is about thriving. It's not sackcloth and ashes. You know, we have this wonderful world of fruit, beautifully created for us. And that's why I like mono as well, because you can't really top what God's created. You know, it's just amazing, especially if it's naturally grown without chemicals. But there's 3 things I would say are important to thrive on this diet and lifestyle. The first is to be ready for it. So to be ready for it emotionally, mentally, spiritually, and physically. And the transitional diet can really help with that, to lead you in and to prepare you. Some people go straight onto a fruit diet, but it can be challenging. And I know Essie Honorable in her book said she had to go straight onto a fruit diet because she was in such bad health. But in her book, she said it was a really hard thing to do, and she would recommend for most people to do a transitional diet. Also, Arnold Eric talks a lot about transitional diets. So first thing, to be ready for it, to be prepared for the diet. The second thing is to access really good quality fruit. And I can't say that enough. I would not have been able to do 31 years on this diet on standard supermarket food. And sure, there's been times when I've been busy working and had commitments and had to have quite a bit of supermarket food in my daily fruit. But I've always tried to supplement it by having organic or wild or foraged, and foraging is a whole other area that I could talk for ages on. So it's getting good quality fruit, grown in good soil and picked ripe. And we can grow some of our own. We can have an allotment, as they say in England, or community garden. There's ways, if we don't have our own garden, that we can be involved in growing good quality fruit. And community gardens have been shown to be really good for people's mental well-being, because there's that sense of community, of coming together, working together to create, beautiful food. So I think growing your own food is, for most people, if you haven't got your own plot, you can go out and do it. Wild food, foraged food, and making sure the food is as ripe as possible. And organic tends to be picked riper, but not always. And foraging. So that's the second thing. Good soil as well. Make sure it's grown in good soil. Organic, biodynamic, local, wild all tends to be grown in better soil. And the third thing is to have faith in the diet. And I don't mean blind faith. I don't mean just saying, right, I'm going to be a fruitarian for the next 31 years and everything's going to be fine. A diet built on faith is, we get our faith from our knowledge, our networking, our experiences, our research. I continue to research on biology, anatomy, physiology, dietetics. And nothing, as I said before, nothing that I've researched brings me to believe that we are anything other than fruit eaters by our original design. And yes, we have gone off the path. And doing that research, connecting with other people, having a solid foundation. And, when we've got that solid foundation that's built on research and experiences and knowledge and reading, it will keep us on the path. And we will always be looking, do I need to tweak that? Do I need more greens? Do I need more fat? Do I need more of this? How am I feeling? What's lacking? Is there anything lacking? How am I doing? But I think as well with the faith, because one thing is, if we have good faith, if we believe in what we're doing because we've done the groundwork, I think that we get challenged less by other people. I think when we've got that faith, with a good foundation, it's mirrored back to us. And I have been challenged very little over the years on my diet. And even with my children were always very happy and healthy on the diet. But I don't think anybody ever said, oh, that child doesn't look healthy. Oh, you shouldn't be giving your child that diet. Well, not to my face anyway. But I think if you're like, oh, I'm not sure if this diet's good for me, or I'm not sure if it's good for my kids, or am I getting this met, or am I getting my calcium needs, or is this and that? And if you have this, like, you don't have faith, that will be mirrored back, and people will say, oh, that's not very healthy, is it, what you're doing? And I really think it's important to have faith, but built on the foundation, not just blind faith. Oh, I'm going to do this and everything's going to be fine. And I think that is very important. So the three things, just to summarize, is to be ready for the diet, to be ready on all levels, mentally, physically, spiritually, emotionally, to access great quality fruit, grown naturally and in good soils and properly ripe, and to have faith built on research and networking. So
excellent points. Now, real quick, did your children, were they raw vegan growing up for a certain amount of time? Like, for how long, and where are they now with that?
Yeah, well, they were both fruitarian. Yeah, they were not so much into greens, but they had nuts. They used to like, nuts, and I think kids need more protein. And they were also extended breastfed, which I think is very important. I think that's something that I could do a whole other talk on, is that I believe all children need milk for the first 3 to 4 years. And if we're not prepared to extend breastfeed, then we've got to look at how they're going to get those nutrients. So I think that's very important. So they were both long-term breastfed and had fruit, mostly fruit, and some nuts in their diet, not so many greens, both until they were about 14. And then both when they were 14, I think it's very difficult for teenagers with peer pressure. They both wanted to eat different foods, and I'd cook them some vegan foods. And my youngest son is still vegan. My older son isn't vegan or vegetarian, but they both do still eat a lot of fruit. Yeah, and if they're either sick, because they never really got sick as kids, and when they started eating other things, they did start to get sick. But both of them, when they're sick, they just eat fruit. They go and eat fruit, so they kind of know, they've got that knowledge. Yeah.
Well, that is wonderful and great interview, and I'm so glad you were here. And like I said, there's so much we didn't uncover yet, but I don't
Mm.
want a 7 hour interview. I'd rather do 17-hour interviews. So let's do it again, please. Let's have a set of
Yes.
topics to talk about and do it again. I know the viewers would love to have you. And for the viewers, if you have questions for Anne,
Mhm.
you can always contact her at the links. But if you put your questions below the video, we can compile those questions and have her back on and go over those questions maybe. So
Yeah.
Anne, thank you so much for your time, and it's great what you're doing, and I'm glad you're thriving at this and teaching this, and it's you're an example of how great it's working, and that's wonderful. So thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me. It's been wonderful talking with you.
Nature's wealth, good for your health. This is the Raw Life Health Show. Raw Life, brighten up your life.